This weekend, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse opened in theaters. We just time to rank all 13 Spider-Man movies from worst to best. And coming to last place at number 13 is Spider-Man 3. An incredibly jumbled mess of a film, chock full of just bad ideas. Ideas that should be cool, like Peter getting infected with Venom and becoming filled with rage and revenge, are instead incredibly botched. The film was also overstuffed with too many villains and plot lines, and is just overall a nearly unwatchable mess. Number 12, Amazing Spider-Man 2. This has many of the same problems as Spider-Man 3, mainly too many villains and plot lines. The film spends too much time trying to set up a Sinister Six movie that never even happened anyway. But what makes it better than Spider-Man 3 for me is it is more competently directed, and the main crux of the film is the relationship between Peter and Gwen, which is done incredibly well, which makes Gwen's death at the end that much more impactful. Despite the film being a bit all over the place, it still has more heart and emotion than Raimi's Spider-Man 3. Number 11, Morbius. Frankly, I think this movie gets a lot more hate than it deserves. Personally, I find it kind of fun. Now, on a pacing level, it is pretty chopped to pieces, but what it does well is the monster movie element. Scenes of Morbius attacking people on a boat feel straight out of the classic monster movie. The CGI and effects are all very well done. The action is fast-paced, well-directed, and fun to watch. And Matt Smith has a lot of fun hamming it up as the villain. Number 10, Amazing Spider-Man. Now, I don't think this movie needed to be an origin story. They should have just had Peter already be Spider-Man. This film takes a lot of the story elements they were planning to use for Raimi's canceled Spider-Man 4, but they reworked it to be an origin story. So, in that regard, it's a bit of a mess, but it still has a few new ideas and things I think it did well. The scenes of Spider-Man swinging through New York are much more immersive and better directed than the Raimi films. The relationship between Peter and Gwen is much better than Peter and MJ's relationship, but unfortunately, its story is pretty weak. Number 9, Venom. And I get for some people this isn't their thing, for some people it's too cheesy, but for me, I think it's decent. It does suffer from a few tone issues, mainly the first half trying to be more of a horror movie, but the second half going a bit sillier, and the villain isn't the best, the dialogue is a bit clunky, but I still have a lot of fun with it. Number 8, Venom Let There Be Carnage. If you liked the buddy comedy dynamic between Eddie and Venom in the first one, you'll enjoy this one because it's more of that, but if not, it's probably not for you. Woody Harrelson is fantastic as Carnage, and I wish the film would spend more time with him. The film is only around an hour and a half, and a lot of that, unfortunately, is filler. We don't spend a lot of time with Carnage, but yet we do have time for the cliche buddy comedy fight where they go their separate ways, even though you know they're going to forgive each other in the end, and we have time for Venom going to a rave. I don't know, this is time they could have been better spent, but I still had fun with it. Number 7, Spider-Man. By today's standards, it's pretty cheesy, but on the other hand, it does keep in line with the tone of the 60s comics. It's a classic coming-of-age superhero story. Willem Dafoe is fantastic as Goblin, so even though it is a bit cartoony, it's still well done. Number 6, Spider-Man Far From Home. I liked this film a lot more when I first saw it, but upon rewatching it, it is slightly deteriorating quality for me. That's not to say I don't like it, I just feel a lot more issues with it than when I first saw it. The film's biggest problem is that this movie is essentially Spider-Man cleaning up Tony's messes, even posthumously, so he's not really given a chance to be his own character until almost the end of the film. I think Jake Gyllenhaal was well cast as Mysterio, but his motivations, just like half the villains of the MCU, are hatred for Tony Stark. Peter doesn't even get his own villain to fight, he gets Iron Man's leftovers. A lot of humor in the film also feels needlessly crass. Considering Spider-Man is still a teenager in this film, a lot of the raunchier jokes come off as really ewy, and I also don't think Zendaya has any chemistry with Peter, so to have a big part of the film revolve around Peter trying to confess his love for her just doesn't work for me, since I don't care about them as a couple. It's still a fun movie, but it's held back by its need to not let Tony Stark go. Number 5, Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man's first standalone entry in the MCU is a fun one. The film feels like a teen comedy from the 80s, specifically Ferris Bueller, but with a few superhero elements thrown in. Tom Holland plays the unconfident, fresh with the superhero scene Spider-Man really well, but the film is also held back by, yes, its constant need to throw in Iron Man instead of just letting it be a solo Spider-Man film. Though, apart from the first 2 Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, this does feel the most like the original source material. Number 4, Spider-Man 2. One of the best sequels of all time, comic book movie or otherwise. The characters are a lot deeper, the plot is a lot stronger. Peter's character arc in this film feels a lot more personal as he has to figure out how to balance his regular life with being Spider-Man. It does a great job of fleshing out the friendship between Peter and Harry, and it gets destroyed by the end of the film. The villain is a lot more complex, and it leaves on a fantastic cliffhanger, which was destroyed by Spider-Man 3, which made that film so much more disappointing. And it's also a bit more serious than the first film, but also remembers to keep it fun. Number 3, Into the Spider-Verse. What an absolutely amazing film. Fantastic, varied cast of characters, all with their own unique animation style. Spider-Man Noir is black and white, Spider-Ham is an exaggerated cartoon, Penny Parker is anime. All the characters are fun, the action and animation feel like an animated comic book, the story is powerful, and it is a ton of fun. Number 2, Spider-Man No Way Home. While for some this is nothing more than a nostalgia novelty film, for me, I think the film works because of its characters and how their arcs are resolved. Toby's Spidey gets to be the cool older mentor to the other two Spideys, Garfield's Spidey finally gets closure over Gwen's death, and by the end of the film, Tom Holland's Spidey has grown as a character the most than he has in the other films. The other two films, he was thought of as the successor to Stark, but by the end of this film, he is his own person. He gets a fresh reset, he gets a chance to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man he's always wanted to be, he's learned how to control his anger and grief, and how to be responsible for his powers. For some, this is nothing more than a novelty film, but for me, I think it's a film that brings one of the best closures to a character in the MCU. And number 1 is Across the Spider-Verse. Like I said, the first Into the Spider-Verse was already fantastic, but everything about this movie is arguably 10 times better. The first film was very much Miles' story, but here the film focuses more on Gwen. Her character goes through a lot more growth, but also as far as Miles, his character is also expanded. The first film was very much about the relationship between him and his dad, but this film is about him and his mom. And it's also great to see returning characters from the first film along with a ton of creative new ones. Every dimension explored in this film feels incredibly unique with its animation style and characters. The dimensions of characters have their own comics, such as Spider-Gwen, are animated in the style of that comic book's art. The ones created for the film are all very memorable and unique. The plot is also a bit darker and a lot deeper, and it leaves you wanting more. It's a great improvement over the already fantastic original. It doesn't waste any time. It gets right to the meat of the story. It's all killer, no filler. This will be shown in animation and film classes as a teaching tool of how to do a sequel, of how to do an animated film, of how to write characters, and it comes in at number 1. Here to share your ranking of the Spider-Man and Venom movies, and I will see you next time.